I always thought loyalty was a currency that would eventually pay off. It was a grey Saturday afternoon in Ashwood when I stopped by my parents' place, a worn 2-storey red brick house nestled among overgrown maples. I didn't plan to dig through anything heavy, just the usual routine. Help Mum, Lillian, with her mountain of bills and paperwork. She was never a tech person, and somehow that had become my job over the years. "Can you take a look at this, Ethan?" she called from the backyard where she was tending to her flower pots, a crumpled stack of papers in her hand. I sat down at the chip dining table, surrounded by the familiar creak of old wood and the smell of burnt coffee. I sifted through the disorganized mess. Old tax returns, utility bills, scattered grocery lists, until a thick, cream-coloured envelope caught my eye. The bold letters across the front read, "Estate plan and will." I hesitated. Part of me whispered to just set it aside, but curiosity, or maybe an uneasy sixth sense, tugged harder. I opened it, and just like that, my world tilted. Every asset, the house, the savings account, Mum's heirloom jewellery, even the rusty minivan, was bequeathed entirely to my younger brother Zach. Not a word about me, not a note, not a thank you, just a blanket line, "We love both our sons equally." I froze. A decade of financial support, countless weekends spent patching up their crumbling house, late-night emergency runs for prescriptions, bills I'd quietly paid without complaint. It all felt like it had been scrubbed out of existence with a single sentence. I heard Mum's footsteps behind me, light and expectant. "Ethan, did you find the bank statement?" I turned slowly, the will trembling slightly in my hand. "Is this real?" I asked, my voice low but sharp enough to cut glass. She blinked, hesitation flickering across her face. "Oh, that. Ethan, don't make a big deal out of it. Don't make a big deal," I said, each word scraping out of my throat. "You're giving everything to Zach. Zach, who can't hold a job longer than a TikTok trend." Dad, Darren, shuffled into the room, coffee mug in hand, utterly unfazed. "You're doing fine, son. Zach, he needs a little more help finding his way." A hollow laugh escaped me. Finding his way? He's 32, not 12. I stood there, the weight of every sacrifice I made crashing down like rotten beams. Secure, they said. They wanted Zach to feel secure. And what about me? I left the will on the table like it was a piece of trash I no longer wanted to touch. Without another word, I grabbed my jacket and walked out the door. Nobody followed. For the first time in years, the ache wasn't anger. It was emptiness, deep and endless as the Oregon sky. The silence that followed should have hurt. Instead, it felt liberating. For 2 weeks, I didn't hear a thing from Darren or Lillian. No awkward apologies, no rambling justifications. Not even one of Zach's sloppy voice messages asking for a favour. It was like I'd been erased, and honestly, I welcomed it. Then came the text from Dad. "Ethan, the mortgage is due this Friday. Can you transfer the usual amount?" No greeting, no mention of what they'd done. Just straight to the ask, like nothing had changed. I stared at the message for a long time, thumb hovering over my screen. For a second, old habits kicked in, the part of me wired to fix everything, to keep everyone afloat. But that part of me was dead. I typed back slowly, every word solid as stone. "Ask Zach." It's his house now, right? I hit send. No hesitation. 10 minutes later, another notification popped up. "Mom, this time. Ethan, don't be like this. We need to talk." I didn't reply. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I just didn't care anymore. For years, I had played the part of the dutiful son, the problem solver, the financial safety net. the invisible glue holding their crumbling lives together. I told myself loyalty meant love, that sacrifice meant worth, all lies. The next morning, Zach chimed in too, because of course he did. You're overreacting. They didn't mean it like that. You've always been independent. I'm not. Right. Because being irresponsible was now some kind of virtue, I fired off one short reply. Then prove you deserve what you've been given. Start by paying the mortgage. Silence. Good. Over the next few days, more messages trickled in. A $2,900 payment request from Mum. A missed call from Dad. Another text from Zach about how I was breaking the family apart. Each one felt smaller, less important, like distant radio static I could finally tune out. I went further. I called the bank and removed my name from the joint mortgage account. I cancelled the auto payments for the water, electricity, even their Wi-Fi. I wiped the billing reminders off my phone. Every digital chain snapped clean. For the first time in my adult life, my money was mine. My time was mine. I was mine. That night, I celebrated quietly. A slice of triple chocolate cake. My favourite old record spinning soft in the background. No guilt. No second thoughts. Just peace. They would feel the shift soon enough. They would learn what it was like to live without the person they had taken for granted. And I was finally free. The first signs came quicker than I expected. 3 days after I severed the financial ties, I got a message from Mum. No greeting, no explanation, just pure panic. Ethan, the internet got shut off. Zach doesn't know how to fix it. Can you just help this once? I didn't answer. It felt almost surreal, how fast everything unraveled once I stepped away. The house I had patched together with my bare hands, leaky pipes, broken roof tiles, busted heating system, was beginning to rot from the inside out, and there was no one left to save it. Zach had always been good at dodging responsibility. I wasn't surprised he didn't know how to log into a billing account or schedule a repair call. What stunned me was how quickly the others fell apart without a backup plan. By the end of that week, the landline was disconnected. The lights started flickering, unreliable. A neighbour, Miss Wilson, who had known my parents since I was a kid, left a voicemail. Your mum asked if I knew someone who could help sell houses. Are they moving? I sat on my couch, phone resting loosely in my hand, just listening to her words float into the quiet. Selling? Of course they were. They had no way to sustain that old, sinking brick box now. 4 weeks. That's all it took for the life they clung to, the one I had secretly subsidized for years, to begin collapsing. The next hit came hard and official. A foreclosure notice pinned to their front door. Miss Wilson texted me a picture of it. No caption. She didn't need one. The reality screamed from the page loud enough. Shortly after, Dad tried calling again. Then texting. Ethan, please. It's serious. We need you. Need. The word hung there like a bad taste. When they needed repairs, they called me. When they needed money, they called me. When they needed someone to erase their mistakes quietly, they called me. But when it came to love, acknowledgement, basic respect, I was invisible. So, this time, I let the call ring out. I set my phone down, brewed a cup of coffee, and watched the storm clouds roll across Ashwood's tired little skyline without flinching. The messages kept coming. Zach's tone shifted from guilt-tripping to anger. You're seriously going to let Mom and Dad lose everything after all they did for you? The irony nearly made me choke on my coffee. All they did for me? What exactly was that? Handing my life's work and loyalty to someone who couldn't even pay a parking ticket. No, this wasn't abandonment. This was self-preservation. They tried a new tactic next, public shame. One sleepy Sunday morning, Olivia, a co-worker from the arts centre, messaged me, "You need to see what's happening on Facebook." With a sinking feeling, I logged in. There it was, my mum's page, flooded with teary posts and half-truths. A photo of the house, captioned, "It's heartbreaking when your own son turns his back on family." After all the sacrifices we made, dozens of sympathetic comments followed, crying emojis, prayers, thinly veiled jabs about ungrateful children these days. A few scrolls later, I found a post from Zach too. "Family's supposed to be forever. Guess some people forgot that when things got tough." I stared at the screen, pulse pounding in my ears. There it was, their final weapon, guilt through spectacle. But they underestimated one thing. I wasn't the scared, desperate son they remembered, willing to swallow shame just to stay part of the story. I was done playing the villain in a script they wrote. That night, I crafted one post. Simple, direct. I uploaded a photo, the will, clear as day, with Zach's name listed as sole heir, screenshots of my payment history for the mortgage, utilities, insurance, and one final message underneath. My silence wasn't consent. It was survival. Here's the truth. No rage, no accusations, just receipts. Within an hour, my post had more shares than anything Mum had ever posted. People who knew me, real friends, old neighbours, co-workers, flooded the comments with support. "Ethan, we always knew you were the one holding that house together. Family isn't blood, it's how you treat people. You did more than anyone ever should have had to." By the next morning, Mum had scrubbed her timeline clean. Dad's Facebook went mysteriously deactivated. Zach changed his profile picture to some dark, moody landscape, his go-to move when he wanted sympathy without having to say anything real. And me, I didn't post again, I didn't need to. One truth bomb had been enough to shatter the house of lies they tried to build around me. Still, the fallout didn't end online. Claire, a real estate agent I knew from the arts centre, bumped into me later that week. "Hey, Ethan," she said, an awkward kindness in her voice. "Your family's house. It's on the urgent sale listings. Major price drop. Roof's a mess. Foundations cracked. No offers yet." I nodded, unsurprised. A house built on denial can't stand, especially without someone quietly fixing every broken thing behind the scenes. Especially without me. As the days blurred into colder mornings and darker evenings, I found myself walking through Liberty Park with my camera, breathing in the freedom, like it was a brand new season. I wasn't carrying anyone anymore. The weight was gone. I didn't belong to that crumbling house, or to the people who only remembered me when their world was falling apart. I belonged to myself now, finally. And that was a kind of wealth they could never steal. There's a particular kind of quiet that follows after a bomb drops. Not chaos, not screaming, just this strange, heavy stillness. That's what it felt like after I posted the truth. The family group chat I was still technically part of, it went dead. No new texts from Mum. No guilt-laced rants from Zach. No cold "we just need to talk" pings from Dad. At first, it was almost eerie, like the entire town of Ashwood had collectively inhaled and decided to hold its breath. But I wasn't scared of the silence anymore. I welcomed it. The next major crack came 2 weeks later. Olivia flagged me down as I was setting up photo boards at the community arts centre. "You're not going to believe this," she said, half laughing, half shaking her head. "Your brother's been trying to rent out rooms in the house on Vine Street." I blinked. "Seriously?" She nodded. "Posted on 3 local Facebook groups, even offered discounts for first responders." I almost felt bad for Zach. Almost. Because anyone who walked through that door would immediately smell the mildew, see the sagging floorboards, hear the ominous hum of a dying furnace. The house was a wreck without me patching it up. And no amount of discounts could hide that. A few days after that, Miss Wilson, the retired teacher next door, called me. She kept her voice low, like she didn't want anyone overhearing through the receiver. "Your mum's been knocking on doors, asking neighbours if they know anyone willing to buy fast," she whispered. "She's even offering ton throw in the furniture." I leaned against my kitchen counter, suppressing a hollow laugh. Furniture? Most of it was from the 70s, worn thin and stained with the ghosts of forgotten dinners. No one was going to take that deal. Meanwhile, my life moved on, quietly but surely. The arts centre offered me more hours, and I started teaching evening photography classes. The kids loved it, the way light could change a whole picture, the way you could tell a story without ever speaking. Each class felt like a little reclamation of my time, my energy, my joy. I picked up side gigs too, portrait sessions, a few small weddings. It wasn't a fortune, but it was mine. I even signed up for a weekend video editing course in Portland, something I'd dreamed of years ago, but had always shoved aside because family needs came first. Not anymore. Still, like clockwork, the past kept knocking, literally. One rainy afternoon, I pulled into my apartment complex and spotted a familiar rusty minivan, the same one I had helped co-sign years ago when Dad's credit score tanked. My stomach twisted instinctively. Sure enough, as I got out, there they were, Darren, Lillian and Zach, standing awkwardly near the gate like they'd stumbled in from a different lifetime. They looked smaller, weathered, deflated in a way I had never seen before. It was Lillian who stepped forward first. "Ethan," she said, voice trembling. "We're sorry we had to come here like this, but things have gotten bad." She clutched a battered folder in her hands, foreclosure notices, late payment warnings, final demand letters all spilling out like guilty confessions. Darren cleared his throat, his usual bravado stripped away. "We made mistakes. We know that," he muttered. "But your mum, she can't handle losing the house. Please, just a little help. Just for a few months." I stood still, rain dripping from the brim of my hoodie, hands jammed deep into my pockets. I looked at them, really looked. At the desperation, the regret, the heavy stink of consequences finally catching up after all the free rides and scapegoating. "You remember," I said, my voice low and even, "when you sat down with that lawyer and decided Zach should get everything." Zach shifted uncomfortably beside the minivan, avoiding my eyes. "You made your choice," I continued. "Now you live with it." "But we thought you were strong enough," Lillian blurted. "We thought you didn't need." "And Zach did?" I cut her off, a cold edge slipping into my tone. Zach needed rewards for failure, and I needed punishment for competence. Nobody said anything. The rain picked up, hammering the pavement between us. I could feel the weight of their expectations pressing against my chest, pleading with the version of Ethan they used to know, the one who would have caved, who would have stretched himself thin again just to be good enough. But that Ethan was gone. "I'm not saying no because I can't help," I said slowly. "I'm saying no because if I do, nothing will ever change." Zach finally found his voice, small, defensive, almost childish. "You're just going to let us lose everything?" I stared straight into his bloodshot, frantic eyes. "I'm not letting anything happen," I said. "You made your choices. Now you get your consequences." They left after that, no screaming, no scenes, just a hollow kind of retreat. I watched the taillights disappear into the mist without feeling triumphant. There was no victory in this, only survival. The aftermath was predictable. More Facebook sob stories. More dramatic posts about betrayal and ungratefulness. But now, nobody really believed them. My single, brutally honest post had already cracked the perfect family facade they tried to maintain. They couldn't guilt me anymore. They couldn't control the narrative. And worst of all for them, they couldn't erase me like they had planned to. I wasn't the background character in their story anymore. I had become the one writing my own. Fall slid into winter, and with it, a peace I had never known before. I spent my days teaching, editing, wandering through Liberty Park with my camera slung over my shoulder. No bills blowing up my phone. No desperate emergencies. No buried resentment gnawing at my insides. Just the quiet satisfaction of building something for myself. No strings, no debts, no guilt. Meanwhile, back on Vine Street, the house continued to crumble, and so did the family who once believed they could survive without the very foundation they spent years ignoring. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the safety net. I was the sky. Wide open, untouchable, free. You'd think that after the final confrontation, they would have backed off. You'd think pride or maybe shame would keep them quiet. But no, the thing about people who have always depended on you to clean up their messes is that they don't learn boundaries overnight. A week after the meeting in the rain, I got a Facebook notification. Olivia messaged me again, Ethan. You should check Lillian's page. It's bad. I didn't want to. I already knew what I'd find. But curiosity pulled me in anyway. There it was. A post pinned to the top of her timeline, a carefully staged photo of the old house with the caption, "Heartbreaking when your own child abandons you in your hour of need after all the sacrifices made for them. Please pray for us." Hundreds of comments poured in, strangers offering sympathy, old church acquaintances asking how they could help. A few not-so-subtle digs aimed at me, the selfish son who forgot where he came from. I didn't react. I didn't even flinch, because I had seen this move coming a mile away. I spent an hour gathering everything, screenshots of the will naming Zach, the sole beneficiary, copies of the mortgage payments and utility bills, all signed by me. Texts from Darren asking for money like it was an ATM transaction. And then, without drama, without any grand announcement, I posted it all. One clean, factual post. One truth laid bare. For those wondering, here's the full story. I spent years supporting a household that forgot I existed once I wasn't useful anymore. I am not bitter. I'm not angry. I'm just done. No hashtags. No theatrics, just cold, undeniable receipts. The reaction was immediate. Friends and even some distant family members flooded my inbox. We always knew you were the one keeping everything afloat. It's disgusting what they did to you, Ethan. Proud of you for standing up. Blood doesn't make family. Loyalty does. Lillian's post disappeared within hours. Darren's account quietly went private. Zach, true to form, started posting vague, passive-aggressive quotes about fake people and family betrayal. But it was too late. The truth had landed. And for once, I wasn't the one left explaining myself. Life moved faster after that. The house on Vine Street finally hit the open market, asking price slashed 3 times. Claire sent me the listing out of morbid curiosity. House needs extensive repairs. Seller highly motivated. Immediate occupancy. Translation, it was falling apart, and they were desperate. Word around town was that Zach had moved back in with Lillian and Darren, pretending to help out while secretly draining what little money they had left. Not my problem anymore. Meanwhile, my own world blossomed in ways I never expected. My savings account, once a ghost town, was growing steadily. No surprise medical bills for people who forgot my birthday. No last-minute mortgage crises ruining my weekends. I took a trip up to Seattle for a fall photography workshop, something I had dreamed about for years but always convinced myself was too selfish. Turns out, investing in yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. I found peace in the small, steady things. Early mornings editing photos with a cup of coffee steaming beside me. Teaching my students how to frame the world differently through a camera lens. Taking walks by Liberty Lake, capturing sunsets that looked like paintings no one could ever duplicate. I even started writing again, a small blog at first. Stories about toxic family patterns, about letting go of roles that were never yours to carry. One post went semi-viral. Strangers messaged me, "Thank you for putting into words what I've never been able to say. I thought I was the only one who felt like this. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't alone. And I wasn't invisible." Then, one early winter afternoon, while reorganizing old photo folders, I found something. An unopened blue envelope tucked between dusty books. A letter. From Lillian. The handwriting was shaky but unmistakable. I hesitated before opening it. Inside, it was exactly what I expected, and yet not. No real apology. No acknowledgement of the will. Just lines about how hard things had gotten, how Darren wasn't strong anymore, how she missed me, how they didn't know how much time they had left to fix things. At the end, a plea. If you're willing, we're still here. I folded the letter neatly. I didn't tear it up. I didn't throw it away. I placed it inside the bottom drawer of my desk, the same drawer where I kept old photographs, half-finished drafts, and broken pieces of the life I had outgrown. Not out of bitterness, not even sadness, but because some things belong to the past, and that's where they have to stay. I didn't reply, because healing doesn't always come with a reunion. Sometimes healing means choosing silence over old patterns, choosing peace over obligation, choosing yourself even when it breaks traditions written in blood. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I wasn't hoping they would change. I was simply free. The last I heard, the house still hadn't sold. Zach had posted some cryptic update about life being unfair and starting over. I closed the tab without reading the rest, because their chaos wasn't mine to fix anymore. Their collapse wasn't my responsibility. Their lessons weren't mine to teach. I had taught myself enough hard lessons already. One crisp morning, walking through Liberty Lake Park with my camera swinging against my hip, I paused at the sight of a young boy chasing bubbles, his mother laughing and reaching for him in the golden light. I raised my camera and captured it. The joy, the motion, the life. That single moment, frozen forever. And in that breath, I realized family isn't built by shared last names. It's built by shared love, shared respect, shared choices. And if no one else could give me that, it was okay, because I had already found it. Inside myself, I didn't lose my family. I lost the people who never really saw me. And in their place, I found something better. A life that was finally my own. No guilt, no apology, no regret, just freedom. And this time, I wasn't looking back. Story 2. You ever have one of those moments where your past decisions, or someone else's, suddenly come back around like a slap to the face? That was me a few weeks ago, sitting across from my parents while they asked me, a 34-year-old software developer, to help them out a little. Not for bills. Not for medical emergencies. No, they wanted a loan to cover my sister's over-the-top wedding. The same parents, mind you, who told me I was on my own the minute I turned 18. Anyway, names have changed here. Call me Ryan. My parents, Mark and Diane, are hard-working but, let's just say, financially creative people. Dad runs a local hardware store that's been on shaky legs for years, and Mum used to teach music before she retired. My younger sister, Claire? She's 30 now. We haven't spoken in 5 years, and honestly, that's been a blessing. Spoiled, entitled, mean, Claire was the golden child who never outgrew her princess complex. For years, I kept the peace for the sake of family events. But 5 Christmases ago, she showed up at my new apartment, looked around with this face like she'd smelled something awful, and spent the whole evening talking about how her boyfriend, now fiancé, lived in a literal mansion compared to my place. She made sure everyone knew, loudly. I snapped. Politely, but still. I pointed out that, unlike her and her rich boyfriend, I actually paid my rent without help, that my tiny, old-fashioned apartment was mine, and if she didn't like it, she could find the door. Spoiler, she found it, and took her boyfriend with her. We haven't spoken since. 0 regrets. Fast forward, the wedding crisis a couple of months ago, I found out through the family grapevine that Claire was finally getting married. Same guy. No surprise there. My parents, desperate not to be outdone by the groom's wealthy family, had promised to pay for a big chunk of the wedding. Venue, decorations, entertainment. They couldn't afford it at all. So, naturally, they turned to me. They sat me down in my living room looking all serious and somber and asked if I could loan them the money to help out. Just for a little while, they said. Family should support each other, they said. I looked them dead in the eyes and remembered exactly where I was when they told me, at 18 years old, that I was on my own now, and they wouldn't help pay for college because it was better to struggle and become independent. They hadn't even tried to save a dime for me or Claire. I worked my butt off through school, took out student loans under my grandfather's co-signature because my parents refused to even entertain the idea of borrowing money. Borrowing was beneath them, they said. But suddenly, for Claire's Pinterest dream wedding, loans were fine now? Nope. I told them no, politely but firmly. And let me tell you, the silence was deafening. They left without a word, but the backlash didn't take long. Within days, I started getting texts and calls from relatives. Apparently, I was petty and ungrateful. I was punishing my parents for ancient history. Was I? Honestly, I don't think so. I made peace with their decision years ago. But forgiving isn't the same as forgetting, and certainly not the same as pretending it never happened. They had made it crystal clear back then. You turn 18, you're on your own. Sink or swim. I swam. And now, when they're drowning, they want me to pretend none of that ever happened. Just throw a lifeline like it's nothing. Sorry, not this time. The fallout for a few days after that, the family group chats were basically all about me. Every cousin, aunt, and second cousin twice removed had an opinion. Most weren't kind. I stayed quiet. I didn't argue, didn't defend myself. Because honestly, if someone didn't already get where I was coming from, no amount of explaining was going to fix it. And it's not like Claire invited me to the wedding anyway. Shocking, I know. Everything would have stayed a cold silence, if not for what happened next. 2 days later, my parents showed up at my door again, this time visibly angry. Apparently, Claire had uninvited them from the wedding. Full stop. No take-backs. Why? Because when my parents finally confessed they couldn't pay for everything they'd promised, Claire lost it. She demanded they figure it out, because asking her fiancé's parents for extra money would make her, and by extension, her whole side of the family, look bad. Honestly, as much as I can't stand Claire, I get it. My parents made big promises they couldn't keep. If you know your kid expects champagne and caviar and you barely have beer and pretzel money, maybe don't offer to fund a black tie wedding. I told them that too, straight up. that it wasn't my fault they were in this mess. They overpromised because they were too proud to admit they couldn't afford to compete with the groom's family. That's not my circus, not my monkeys. Predictably, they didn't take it well. They blamed me. If you'd just helped us, none of this would have happened, my mum said, tears in her eyes. That's when I realised this wasn't just about money. It was about control, about the fact that I had finally quietly said no, and they didn't know what to do with it. I told them to leave, and this time I didn't feel a shred of guilt. I figured after that last door slam, things would die down. Maybe the family would stew for a while. Maybe Claire would have her tantrum. Maybe my parents would lick their wounds and move on. Nope, not even close. A week later, I got home from work, tired, cranky, just wanting to kick back, and guess who was standing on my porch, like some Hallmark movie villain? Claire. I stared at her through the screen door for a second, wondering if maybe I'd finally snapped from all the stress and was hallucinating. But nope, there she was, shifting from foot to foot, holding some fancy gift bag like it was a peace offering. For a second, I thought about turning around and pretending I wasn't home. But curiosity got the better of me. I opened the door. She smiled, that fake little tight smile people wear when they're about to serve you a plate of bullshit. "Hey Ryan," she said, all soft and sweet, like we hadn't spent 5 years pretending the other didn't exist. "Can we talk?" Against my better judgment, I let her in. Mostly because I wanted to see what angle she was playing at. We sat awkwardly in my living room, her perched on the edge of the couch like a cat ready to bolt. She launched into this long, teary-eyed apology about how she was immature back then and didn't realise how hurtful she was. She said the wedding made her realise how important family was, how badly she wanted me there. Honestly, it was a decent performance. Oscar-worthy, almost. And for about 5 seconds, a tiny part of me wanted to believe her. But if life has taught me anything, it's this. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Sure enough, after all the sniffling and speechifying, she got to the real reason she was there. See, now that our parents were out of the picture, so was their money. And Claire? She wasn't about to let her dream wedding shrink down to reasonable human levels. Not if she could help it. That's when she asked me, no, begged me, to loan her the money directly. Not a little loan either. Tens of thousands. She even offered to sign some contract she printed off Google to make it official. I leaned back in my chair and just looked at her for a minute. It was almost impressive. Honestly, the audacity it took to show up like this, after everything, and ask for a handout. When I didn't immediately agree, her whole act started to slip. She shifted gears fast, from apologetic sister to annoyed princess in less than 2 minutes, told me I was being dramatic and holding grudges and not acting like family. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was just so predictable. I told her I'd think about it, just to get her out of my house without a scene. She gave me a tight little smile, hugged me like she didn't mean it, and left. As soon as the door clicked shut, I locked it and locked her number right along with it. There was no thinking about it. I already knew the answer. No way in hell. Family fallout, round 2, of course. Word got out fast. Claire ran straight to the extended family. Aunts, uncles, second cousins who can't mind their business, and spun some story about how I led her on and promised to help but then cruelly backed out. Cue round 2 of angry texts, guilt trips, and passive-aggressive Facebook posts. It was like being back in high school, except now the mean girls had mortgages and arthritis. I ignored it. Deleted the messages, blocked the numbers, changed my privacy settings. Life's too short to let other people's drama rent space in your head for free. But honestly, as exhausting as it all was, a small part of me felt free. For the first time in my life, I wasn't jumping when they snapped their fingers. I wasn't smoothing things over. I wasn't swallowing my feelings just to keep the peace. I was choosing myself. Finally, a surprise in the mail just when I thought the whole wedding debacle was done and dusted. Another curveball hit me. A couple of weeks later, a wedding invitation showed up in my mailbox. Handwritten envelope, fancy calligraphy. Claire and her fiancé's names on the front, intertwined like a bad tattoo design. At first, I thought it was some kind of joke, but when I flipped the card open, it was real. I was actually invited. Confused doesn't even begin to cover it. After all that drama, the fights, the blame, the accusations, now she wanted me there. I hesitated for days. I even debated just tossing it in the trash and moving on. But something didn't sit right. Not anger, not resentment, just curiosity. So, against my better judgment again, I texted her. Just one line. Thanks for the invite. Are you sure you want me there? Hours passed with no response. I figured she was ghosting me. Whatever. Then, out of nowhere, she called. Her voice was different this time. Not syrupy, not fake, just tired. She told me she had meant the original apology, even if she'd gotten caught up later, that she wasn't proud of how she'd handled things, that she had pulled together the money for the wedding without our parents or me. She didn't need anything from me now, just wanted me there if I was willing. Said she was trying to be a different person, that she couldn't undo the past, but maybe she could start building something new. For once, she didn't try to guilt me, didn't try to sell me on some sob story, just laid it out there. And you know what? I believed her. Maybe because I wanted to. Maybe because she sounded like someone who'd finally been forced to grow up a little. Or maybe because after all the crap with our parents, it felt like we both needed to prove, if only to ourselves, that we could do better than the examples we'd been given. Decision time, I didn't say yes right away. I told her I'd think about it. Hung up, sat there for a while, just breathing, just being. Was I really ready to step back into that minefield? To show up at a wedding full of relatives who now looked at me like I was the villain in their soap opera? Was it worth it? I didn't know. But for the first time in a long time, the choice was actually mine, and that made all the difference. I didn't decide right away, took a few long walks, talked it over with my grandparents, the only people in my family who hadn't stabbed me in the back at this point. They just listened, didn't push me either way, just let me say what I needed to say. And somewhere in the middle of venting about everything, Claire's past, my parents' hypocrisy, the way the rest of the family turned into a pack of hyenas, I realised something. This wasn't about Claire anymore. This was about me, about the kind of man I wanted to be. I could sit out of spite. Easy. Nobody would blame me. But maybe, just maybe, I wanted to show up. Not because Claire deserved it, but because I deserved to know I didn't turn into the same bitter person who raised us. So, IRSVPD. Simple, no big announcement. Just mailed the little card back. Checked will attend. Done. The wedding it was a small ceremony compared to the original fantasy Claire had cooked up. But honestly, it was beautiful. Sunlight pouring through old oak trees, simple flowers, a little rustic barn turned reception hall, no giant crystal chandeliers or champagne fountains, just laughter, music, and people who wanted to be there. When I showed up, Claire saw me from across the crowd and just about broke down. She rushed over, hugged me, really hugged me, and whispered, "Thank you for coming." And for once, I could tell she meant it. It wasn't perfect. Some of the relatives still shot me. Looks like I'd personally set their houses on fire. A few turned their backs when I passed by. I didn't care. I wasn't there for them. Later, right before the ceremony started, Claire pulled me aside. She looked nervous. Not bridezilla nervous, just human nervous. And she asked me something that caught me off guard. "Would you walk me down the aisle?" I blinked at her, stunned. I mean, this was supposed to be my dad's job, right? The man who couldn't be bothered to pick up the phone, let alone apologize. The man who taught me that family support came with price tags and fine print. But he wasn't there. Neither of our parents were. They weren't coming. Apparently after the fallout, after all the blame games and backdoor gossip, they decided if they couldn't control the narrative, they wouldn't show up at all. Classic. I looked at Claire, this woman who used to be my worst nightmare growing up, and I saw it. The sadness, the disappointment, the tiny sliver of hope. And in that moment, it wasn't about history or grudges. It was about standing up for someone who was trying, in her own broken way, to be better. I said yes. And when the music started, and I walked Claire down that grassy aisle under the big oak trees, I didn't feel bitter. I didn't feel resentful. I just felt lighter. Like maybe some things don't have to end the way you expect. After the wedding, we're not best friends now. Let's not get crazy. Claire and I still have a lot of history, years you can't just sweep under the rug with one apology in a Pinterest wedding. But it's better. We talk now. Not every day, not about everything, but enough. Enough that when she sends me pictures of her new house or asks for advice on setting up her Wi-Fi, it doesn't feel like some fake attempt to manipulate me. It feels real. As for my parents, they're still frozen in their little ice castle of pride and denial. They never apologized to me or to Claire. Last I heard, they were telling anyone who'd listen that both their kids turned on them after all they sacrificed. And maybe that's true in their heads. But the thing about growing up is realizing you don't have to keep setting yourself on fire to keep other people warm. Sometimes you just walk away from the fire altogether. And that's exactly what I did. Final thoughts. I used to think standing up for yourself had to look like a big fight, shouting matches, slammed doors, dramatic exits. Turns out sometimes it just looks like saying no and meaning it. It looks like choosing who gets to be in your life, even when everyone else is screaming that you're wrong. It looks like walking someone down an aisle not because they're perfect, but because they're trying, because you're trying too. And it looks like sitting alone on your porch, long after the sun's gone down, with a glass of cheap whiskey and the kind of peace you can't buy with any amount of money. That's where I'm at now. And for the first time in a long time, it feels like enough. Story 3, when my parents refused to pay for college, they set the tone for everything that followed. You know, I used to think resentment would fade over time. Turns out, it just gets quieter and sharper. I'm Marcus, 35 now, a software engineer who's doing pretty decently by most standards. Growing up, though, let's just say the deck wasn't exactly stacked in my favour. My parents' dad, who owns a small-town hardware store, and Mum, a retired choir teacher, weren't terrible people. They just had a terrible habit, making excuses for my little sister, Vanessa. Vanessa's 4 years younger than me and has been the centre of their universe since birth. The golden child, the sun around which everything else revolved. I was the dependable one, the one who didn't need anything because I'd figure it out. Guess that's code for we're going to forget about you entirely. We haven't spoken in 5 years, Vanessa and I. And honestly, that was long overdue. The final straw, Christmas, half a decade ago. I'd finally moved into my own place, tiny, sure, but it was mine, and I offered to host the family dinner. I scrubbed every corner, put up decorations, cooked a full spread. I wanted it to be special. Vanessa waltzed in with her new boyfriend, who, of course, came from money, and spent the whole evening making passive-aggressive digs at my apartment. "It's so cozy," she said, which we all know is rich people speak for small and pathetic. She bragged about her boyfriend's mansion while picking at the food like it was radioactive. I held it in as long as I could. When she commented on the sketchy neighborhood one too many times, I snapped. Politely, but firmly, I reminded her that I paid my own rent. No co-signers, no parental safety nets. Unlike her and her flavor of the month, I told her that if my home wasn't good enough, the door was right there. They left in a storm of offended glares and awkward murmurs. That was the last time I voluntarily put myself in her orbit. And it was the beginning of the long overdue reckoning between me and the rest of the family. Fast forward to a few weeks ago, I got a call from my parents. I knew it had to be serious because usually when they called, it was to talk about Vanessa. Sure enough, it was about her upcoming wedding to the same guy, by the way. Apparently, Vanessa had decided that nothing less than a storybook wedding would do. Lavish venue, designer decor, the whole 9 yards. And naturally, my parents, despite their very modest finances, had promised to cover a significant chunk of the expenses. If you're wondering why 2 retirees and a small business owner thought they could outspend a multi-millionaire's family, well, join the club. Reality finally caught up with them. With the wedding only months away, they realized they were hopelessly over their heads. So they did what they hadn't done in years. They reached out to me. They didn't ask for a favor. They asked for a loan. And here's the kicker: they expected me to just hand it over, no questions asked. As if we were all one big, happy family who had always supported each other equally. I didn't even have to think about it. I said no. It wasn't out of spite. It was about principle. Back when I was 18, I asked them for help with college tuition. I didn't demand it. I suggested maybe they could co-sign a loan or help a little bit. After all, college wasn't cheap, and I wanted to focus on studying, not working 40 hours a week to barely scrape by. They shot me down instantly. Apparently, once you hit 18 in our family, you were supposed to be fully self-sufficient. That's how they did it back in the day. It builds character, my dad said. Borrowing money is shameful, Mom chimed in. No son of ours is going to get into debt. Well, unless it's for Vanessa's fairy tale wedding, I guess. Then debt's suddenly patriotic. Anyway, I cobbled together financial aid and student loans on my own, thanks mostly to my grandfather, who quietly co-signed when my parents refused. I busted my ass through college, graduated near the top of my class, and landed a good job. Meanwhile, Vanessa skipped college altogether because, according to her, she was either going to take over Dad's store or marry rich. Spoiler, she chose option B. When my parents came asking for money, I politely, maybe a little icily, reminded them of their no loans policy. You know, the one they had insisted was a matter of principle when it was my future on the line. I wasn't yelling, I wasn't angry. I just laid it all out, point by point. It was one of those moments where you realize you're not speaking to reasonable adults. You're talking to people who only follow their own rules when it benefits them. They left without much of a response, mostly because there wasn't one. I figured that was the end of it. Of course, I was wrong. Within days, the family group chats lit up. Cousins, uncles, random family friends I barely remembered, all chiming in about how I was selfish and disrespectful and forgot where I came from. Apparently, refusing to fund Vanessa's wedding palooza made me a monster. Never mind that nobody cared when I was eating ramen every day to make it through college. Never mind that none of them offered a single dime to help me back then. It's different, apparently, when it's Vanessa. I blocked most of them without a second thought. I didn't owe them an explanation, and honestly, I was tired of playing the villain in their little family soap opera. But the situation was far from over, because the next time I heard from my parents, it wasn't to apologize. It was to blame me for getting them uninvited from their own daughter's wedding. Blamed for a wedding I wasn't even invited to. 2 days after the family group chat circus, my parents showed up at my place, unannounced. I opened the door and knew right away it wasn't a social visit. They looked off. You know when someone's been stewing in anger for days, convincing themselves they're the victim. Yeah, that. They barely made it past the living room before Dad started in. We got uninvited from Vanessa's wedding, he said, like it was an accusation. I blinked. Okay, and how is that my fault? Mum jumped in, tears already welling up. If you had just helped us like we asked, this never would have happened. We wouldn't have had to go back to her, explaining that we couldn't pay. Right, because that was my responsibility somehow. Turns out, after I refused the loan, they had to confess to Vanessa that the money wasn't going to be there, that they couldn't afford the grand venue, the luxury decorations, the open bar for 300 people. They begged her to ask her fiancé's family to chip in. Vanessa, being Vanessa, absolutely lost it. Screamed at them, said they were embarrassing her, that they'd promised her a dream wedding and now were making her look like a charity case in front of her in-laws. From what I gathered, she didn't technically uninvite them. She just told them she couldn't deal with their drama and didn't want them causing more problems. And they, in true dramatic fashion, decided they were no longer welcome. And somehow that was my fault. I stayed calm, mostly because I'd seen this play out before, just on smaller stages. I told them point blank, you made promises you couldn't keep. You tried to buy her approval with money you didn't have. That's on you, not me. They didn't like hearing that. Dad's face turned an alarming shade of red. Mom made that tight, pinched expression she always made when she realized she couldn't guilt-trip me into folding. They tried a new tactic, pity. We're your parents, Marcus. After everything we've done for you, I laughed. Couldn't help it. Everything you've done for me. Like what? Refusing to help me with college because of your principles. But when it's about Vanessa's party, those principles suddenly don't matter. Silence. And not the good, reflective kind. The heavy, resentful kind. They left not long after that, full of wounded dignity and unspoken threats about what the family would think. Guess they made good on that. Within the next few days, I was officially persona non grata with pretty much the entire extended family. Everyone took my parents' side. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, even a couple of cousins who'd once crashed on my couch for months, rent-free. Funny how quickly people turn when you stop letting yourself be the family ATM. At first, it bothered me. I'm not going to lie. Part of me kept replaying it, wondering if I was being petty. If maybe, just maybe, I could have thrown them a bone. But every time I thought about it, I remembered 18-year-old me, sitting in that cramped kitchen, being told by my own parents that needing help made me weak. That borrowing money was shameful. And I realized this wasn't pettiness, this was boundaries. I decided to go no contact. I blocked every number that wasn't necessary. I locked down my social media. I stopped answering any calls from numbers I didn't recognize. And I felt lighter than I had in years. Turns out, cutting out toxic family members feels a lot like breathing after being underwater too long. The only ones who stayed in my corner were my dad's parents, my grandparents, the ones who had quietly helped me get through college all those years ago. They weren't surprised by any of it. In fact, they even admitted they'd expected something like this sooner or later. "We love your father," Grandpa said once, shaking his head. But he's always been good at forgetting who was really there for him. At least someone else saw it for what it was. A couple of weeks passed. I started sleeping better. Work was going great. I even got promoted, funny enough. Karma working overtime, I guess. Then, out of nowhere, came the knock at the door. And there, standing in front of me, like some badly timed ghost from Christmas past, was Vanessa. The apology that was never really an apology at first. I thought I was imagining her. Vanessa standing there, dressed to the nines, full makeup on a random Tuesday afternoon. She looked uncomfortable, like she hated being here as much as I hated seeing her. I didn't say anything, just stepped aside and let her in. Curiosity got the better of me. She started talking fast, like she'd rehearsed it all in the car. "I'm here to apologize," she said, "for everything. For the way I acted at Christmas, for the things I said about your apartment, for, being a brat. It was all very polished, very staged. Like a bad school play where the lead forgot their lines halfway through. I just stood there, arms crossed, waiting. After a few minutes of her circling the subject, it finally came out. She needed money. Apparently, when our parents backed out, her fiancé's family didn't pick up the slack. Instead, they offered to scale things down, a polite way of saying they weren't about to fund Vanessa's princess fantasy. Now, she was short by a lot, and guess who was the only person in the family still capable of writing a check big enough to save the day? Yeah, me. She tried to play it off casually, said she didn't expect to hand out her word, not mine. She even offered to sign a loan agreement, pay me back by the end of the year, whatever it took. It was almost impressive. Watching her act like this was just a normal conversation between siblings who had each other's backs. Except we weren't those people. We never had been. I told her I needed time to think about it, mostly just to get her out of my house without another screaming match. She smiled like she had already won and left without so much as a thank you. But I already knew what my answer was. I wasn't going to save her, not because I hated her, not because I wanted her to suffer, because every single time I had ever needed anything, she wasn't there. Because when I struggled, nobody offered me a safety net. Because family doesn't mean handing over your hard-earned stability to people who treated you like you were disposable. And most of all, because her apology wasn't real. It was just another transaction. When I called her a few days later and told her I wasn't going to help, she exploded. Accused me of being bitter, of being jealous, of holding grudges. Said I was acting too big for my britches now that I had money. I didn't argue, didn't explain, just hung up. Let her yell into the silence. A week later, I got a wedding invitation in the mail. From her. At first, I thought it was a joke, a guilt trip, some kind of last-ditch emotional blackmail. I almost threw it away. But something in me paused. Maybe it wasn't about guilt. Maybe it was about pride. About her trying to show that she didn't need me after all. That she could still have her big day, even if she had to downsize, cut corners, fake a few smiles. I didn't RSVP right away. I wasn't even sure if I was going. I asked my grandparents what they thought. They said the same thing they always did. Go if you want to. Stay home if you don't. Either way, you owe nobody an explanation. It was the kind of advice I should have been getting my whole life. In the end, I decided to go. Not for her. For me. Because sometimes showing up not to support them, but to show yourself that you're no longer afraid of them is the real victory. The wedding was fine. Smaller than she wanted, clearly. Less grand. A little rushed. Vanessa looked beautiful, of course. She always knew how to put on a show. But when she saw me walking in with Grandpa and Grandma on each arm, something in her face cracked, just for a second. It wasn't anger. It wasn't hate. It was regret. Real, bone-deep regret. She asked me quietly, so no one else could hear, if I would walk her down the aisle. Our dad wasn't there. Neither was Mum. Apparently, they'd decided they were still too embarrassed to come. Even after all the drama, all the excuses, they hadn't apologised, hadn't even called. Vanessa didn't have anyone else. So, in the middle of all the chaos, I said yes. Not because she deserved it, but because no one deserves to stand alone on the biggest day of their life, wondering why the people who were supposed to love them couldn't show up. I walked her down that aisle. I handed her off with a small smile. And then I sat in the back and watched from a distance, like a guest at a stranger's wedding. I don't know if we'll ever be close. I don't know if we'll ever really be siblings, the way TV families are, but I know this: I don't carry their baggage anymore. I don't owe them my peace. And no matter what anyone says, I didn't lose my family. They lost me.